Welcome back to the Kyle Olson Show. The coronavirus has provided the opportunity for progressives to try to fundamentally transform the way we do things. We saw that in Michigan with the dramatic increase in mailed-in ballots, didn't we? Here's Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change. Building back better means getting support to the most vulnerable while maintaining our momentum on reaching the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs. Canada is here to listen and to help. This pandemic...
Joining me now is James Delingpole, God Emperor of Breitbart London. He hosts the Delingpod podcast, and you can find him at delingpoleworld.com in addition to Breitbart. So, James, we heard Trudeau say, quote-unquote, reset. He later referred to criticism of using that word as a conspiracy theory. But what is the great reset progressives are hoping to achieve?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That speech that you heard is typical, by the way, of speeches you're hearing leaders and influence make around the world now. For example, you'll hear the same phrases used by Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister. You'll also see this used by Prince Charles, the heir to the throne. He'll soon become King Charles. Justin Trudeau, the Pope, I think, has used the phrase as well. Those phrases you heard being used by Trudeau are all code words, if you like, of the Great Reset. Build back better, for example, is the slogan of the Great Reset. The Great Reset is not a conspiracy theory, or rather, if it is a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy in plain sight because these guys are talking about it all the time. It comes from the World Economic Forum, which is that meeting in Davos that all the billionaires fly to every year in their private jets. It's been described as the place where billionaires lecture millionaires on how ordinary people should live. And the World Economic Forum was founded by a German guy, a rather sinister-looking guy. I think, if you give him a Persian cat, and he would definitely be Blofeld in the James Bond movies. And this guy, Klaus Schwab, is his name. He's bald. He's got this sinister. Well, maybe all German accents sinister. I don't want to malign an entire nation, but he does sound a bit creepy. And Klaus Schwab invented the Great Reset, and the Great Reset it's a phenomenon known as technocracy. And the short version of technocracy, it is a globalist takeover in which the world is going to be run in the future, according to this new world order these guys have got planned, by a technocratic elite. In other words, sort of scientists, engineers. These guys think they have the secret for how we should live our lives, and they will control every detail of our lives. They will control how many vacations we take, what jobs we do, what food we are allowed to eat, above all, what energy we are allowed to use. So technocracy is an energy-based economy. It's actually it's quite interesting. I mean, we're going quite far down the rabbit hole here, but it's worth pointing out for reasons I will explain that technocracy is the first economic system which does not use a form of money as a means of exchange. I mean, obviously, native tribes have used cowrie shells and all manner of things, but this is a completely different economic system, which is dependent on energy allocation. Now, the reason I mention that is because I've been studying the Green movement, essentially they're eco-fascists. I've been studying this for over a decade now. And what's interesting about the Green movement is that if you look at issues like global warming, what you realize is that there is no scientific evidence for it. Man-made global warming, catastrophic global warming does not exist except in computer models, in computer model projections. Now, fast forward from the last 30 years to the present year, 2020, and you'll notice that another apparently catastrophic global problem is dependent on computer models, and that is COVID-19. COVID-19 is actually no worse than maybe a bad flu year, but certainly not. It's certainly not Spanish flu. It's not anywhere near. For a pandemic, very few people have died. Relatively few people have died. But the scare element of COVID-19 exists in computer models. Like, if we do not do this, if we do not lock down, if we do not muzzle ourselves, if we do not muzzle all our citizens, then the death toll will be ... made up high scary figure. So you see what I'm getting at here. This technocracy plan started out as using environmental issues to increase the control of the world by this elite, this unelected elite, by the way. Now they are seizing COVID-19 as their excuse for this great reset. And it's not just the World Economic Forum which talks about this great reset, by the way. It is also the United Nations. The United Nations is intimately bound up with this globalist takeover. And it's not like they haven't been telling us what they plan to do. When they talk about sustainability, when they talk about wealth redistribution, when they talk about climate justice, all these are code phrases for something which I think will ultimately be worse than communism, worse than fascism, worse than Nazism, just because of its absolute constriction on the whole world. If this comes to pass, it will be like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. We will have no political rights. Our futures will be decided by scientists. They will manipulate our world. They will dictate what we're allowed to do. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is already happening now. Now, I've told you far too much. I welcome any questions, because we could go in any direction from here,
Sure.
couldn't we?
So, what is the enforcement agency, I guess, that would do this? Is it the UN? Is it country by country? How are they envisioning that?
That's a really good question, because a lot of people want to, when they're told about this, what they want to go is, I'm going to come up with a reason why this isn't as serious a problem as you make out it is. What would their motivation be? How are they going to achieve this? Let me tell you that this has been going on since the early 1970s. I mean, actually, it's been going on since the 1930s, if you count the original technocracy cult. But in its current incarnation, it was the brainchild of a guy called, you're probably familiar with this, with David Rockefeller, who was obviously one of the heirs to the John D. Rockefeller fortune, and a guy called Zbigniew Brzezinski. I don't know whether you may be too young to remember him. He was very high up in the Carter administration. And Brzezinski and pretty much the entirety of Jimmy Carter's cabinet all belonged to something called, and this is where it gets scary, something called the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission is the organizational uber power responsible for the Great Reset. And what the Trilateral Commission does is it places key ideologues, key influencers, key players in positions of responsibility and influence around the world. So you're right. A lot of these people have positions on the United Nations. Often these are guys involved in deal making, in negotiations with treaties and so on. So what you find is that there is this, and this has happened over a period of 50 years now. You get mission creep. You get even though we don't know often who these guys are, what the names are, or we think of them as kind of shadowy bureaucratic functionaries who do boring stuff that we needn't know about. While we've been ignoring them, they have been busy remaking the world. And every year that goes by, they gain more power. The Great Reset, Agenda 2030, as the UN calls it, gets more embedded in global politics, to the point where we've been captured without even knowing it. The whole of the system has been captured by technocracy.
See, and this is where I think people tend to not believe it, because, and we're almost out of time, but before, all of these sorts of changes would be done through government systems, through regulations, through laws, etc. But now, when technology runs so much and controls so much of our lives, and the social media companies are a perfect example of that. Well, they're not actually the government's not actually banning you from saying that, whatever it may be, but it is the social media company won't let you say that because they'll ban you or they will, force you to delete that tweet. So what is the mechanism of enforcement? Is it through law or is it through private companies?
Let me give you one example. I mean, actually, the private company thing is a different problem, but it's a manifestation of a bigger problem. Let me give you an example. You and I think that that in our countries, we have a thing called private property, don't we? And there's a phrase, an Englishman's home is his castle. And you probably think that when you buy a chunk of real estate in the US, that belongs to you. This is not the case. You think about all the regulations, all the zoning regulations, all the things that when you buy a property in the US, there are very few parts of the US now where you are not subject to local regulations devised by your local government, which are actually a manifestation of, it was originally called Agenda 21. They changed it to Agenda 2030. Things like on land use, on how you, everything from the kind of energy you're allowed to use to power your home, all these regulations. You think that you are free, that you are a free citizen, and you are not. Your life is increasingly strained by all manner of regulations, which you kind of think, yeah, that's a bit annoying, but it's more than annoying. It's actually part of their master plan. I mean, it sounds a sinister word, master plan, but I think it's absolutely true. These guys are thinking decades ahead of us. They've been, they are the lizard-headed master race, except they are for real. And when I tell you just what this really spooked me, the Trilateral Commission included both President George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush. In other words, it goes right to the highest levels. And it's not just Democrats and liberals and lefties who are involved in this scam. It's the Republican swamp as well. We have a major, major problem on our hands, and I'm happy to talk about this again because we run out of time now. But people need to wake up to this thing. The Great Reset is real, and it's probably the biggest threat to our way of life right now in the world.
Well, and I need to have you back because I think we need to spend a lot more time than what we've been able to spend. But James Delingpole, host of the Delingpod podcast and columnist at Breitbart London, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks a lot.
Find his work at delingpoleworld.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. For more of my work, go to Breitbart.com or find me on Twitter, Kyle Olson 4. Use the same handle for Parler, Kyle Olson 4, KYLEOLSON and the number 4. This is The Kyle Olson Show.